Hello, welcome to this week's episode of What One Thing, One Business, One Story and One Lesson to take away in action every week for small business owners looking to grow. I'm Hayley Baxter.
And I'm Phil Davenport, and today we have the absolute pleasure of talking to Alastair Robertson. Alastair, we traditionally like to start up with some quick fire questions. So, could you tell me, how long have you been in business?
Over a number of years. I've been in business with my own company since 2016, but as a manager, a senior manager, under different guises, I suppose you could say I've been around for about 30 years.
How many staff do you have?
So at the moment we have 6 employees and we have 28 freelance contractors. Slight difference there. I guess responsible for probably 34 people.
Do you sell business to business or business to consumer?
Both. We sell business to business for sort of larger organisations, but we do vocational qualifications for individuals. So that would be business to consumer.
And are you the sole owner of the business, or are you part of a board of directors?
There are 3 directors, and my wife and I were the original directors of the company, and then about a year and a half ago I bought another business and we were going to combine the two, and at that point we brought in another director so that I could focus on the merger.
Very good. And I suppose that leads us beautifully into, did you found the business, buy it or join?
I founded the business of Supportive Solutions. I bought the business which was formerly known as Charles Blow Training, which is now the clinical arm of Supportive Solutions, so we call that CB Training by Supportive Solutions. So I suppose there's a bit of a mixed bag going on there. Originally I founded the business and later I added to the business with a clinical training company.
Absolutely love that answer, because I think that's something that we'd be excited to circle back on later, because I know mergers and acquisitions is just such a hot topic in every industry. But let's take you right back to the start. When you initially set up Supportive Solutions, what was the reason, what was the spark that triggered that, and what did your average day-to-day look like before that?
I'm not particularly good at taking instruction from other people, and that's not their fault, that's probably my fault. I think that I have a little bit of neurodivergence about me. I like things to be done in a particular way. That's not to say that it's the correct way, but if you know anybody, or if you experience any kind of neurodivergence yourself, what you'll know is that if you stray from the rails that I have set for a task, you're going to encounter problems. And so what I discovered was that it was probably going to be easier for me and easier for my stress levels to start up working for myself or with myself. And that was the correct decision, because what you do is you rise and fall dependent on your own performance. And I really enjoyed that feedback. I really enjoyed the fact that if it was my decision, it was either good or bad. And so I had the authority to either put it right or to continue doing it. I quite enjoyed that. And I started up on my own after lots and lots of encouragement from other people who were saying, if you start up on your own, we will come to you to buy training. And of course I didn't believe them at first. Because why would you? Why would you believe somebody that says, no, if you start up on your own, we'll come to you. And it's not like you're going to get a haircut. It's it's a little bit different. So yeah, I started it up on my own. I wanted to start up on my own initially because I was struggling mental health wise to accept what other people decide. Turned out to be the right decision for me, because apparently I'm a little bit, shall we say, temperamental if things aren't going my way.
And you've obviously got a big team now, so how do you manage that situation with the big team that you've got today to manage? Because it must still exist, or do they just have to toe the line?
No, what's interesting is I'm a very hands-off type manager. I like people to manage themselves, which is why I chose to go with freelance subcontractors rather than employees. So having been a manager, I think it's quite difficult to be an effective manager, because you get given really a collection of individuals that quite often you didn't choose, and then you have to if you like, create a team out of these people. And the only common thing that they have together is that they work in the same place. Whereas I put together a team of individual self-sufficient contractors, and I told them that my expectation was for them to manage themselves, and I would only intervene if that standard was not being achieved. So in other words, it's a self-sufficient entity, if you like, but it is managed by each individual who is a subcontractor. And I only step in if things have not gone to plan. So how do I manage it now? Well, what I did was at the front end, I told people what my expectations were if they were coming to work with me as a contractor, and then I kind of stuck to that. So in other words, you're going to manage yourself. You're only going to come to me if you need me. And what I'm going to do in return is I am not going to micromanage you.
I absolutely love a lot of what you said because I identify so much with it. So I think the majority of business owners are neurodiverse in some way, or as my wife put it to me, that I was unemployable. And I don't think she meant that as in people didn't want to employ me, but more I wasn't happy to be employed, because I think a lot like, as you're saying again, Alastair, to reiterate, we are given a job by somebody and we will go to the utmost of completing that and doing a great job on it. And if we can take it further and give more value, we'll take it further, give more value. And one of the big blocks that we have is that is not how a normal person operates. A normal person will be given a job, they will ideally have a set procedure that they want to run through, they'll stick with that. And one of the things that I think is the biggest kind of killer for me is you might speak to them 6 months later and you might say, oh, we should really do this. And they go, yeah, I don't know why we've been doing it this way. It's a really crap. And you're saying, but why didn't you bring this to me? What's your procedure? And that differential and the way that you've managed to handle that by bringing in contractors who are independent and so kind of think the same way you do is a really interesting point.
Yeah, it's something that you've got to do, because what you've got to do is you've got to understand yourself, you've got to understand what you'll be happy with. And, well, even if you look at it from the opposite point of view, what's going to make you uncomfortable or what's going to make you want to change things? Well, what's going to make me uncomfortable is that if people are coming to me all the time saying, do you want me to do this? Do you want me to do that? I'm saying, no. What I want you to stop doing is I want you to stop coming and asking me that and just do what we agreed you would do. And so it's really important to me that what I do is I choose the correct people to come into the business that you can't always know, but I've got a 90% certainty that you're going to do that. That's even before you put the advert up to say that you're looking for somebody. You need to understand what you're looking for, then you need to word it accordingly, and then you need to whittle out all the people that you don't want, and then the people that you would like to speak to. That's what I found out. I didn't find that right at the very start though. What I found right at the very start was that there are a lot of people who, if you don't give them the correct information right from the offset, then their ladder is leaning against the wrong building.
I think it's, I was speaking to somebody yesterday, and it's really interesting what you've just said about knowing yourself and knowing what you're happy to do, not do, and where you sit. And I actually think a lot of new business owners particularly feel like they have to be a certain way and do it in a certain way because that's what's told to them, I suppose, by we all live in a world of social media where everybody's telling you what to do and when to do it. Do you think that was a conscious journey for you, or did you know that was the way you wanted to run your business?
No, I suppose is the short answer to that. I think what you do as you go is that you learn from mistakes, and I think once you get your head around mistakes aren't catastrophic, mistakes are actually necessary, then you have a far different view on things. So back at the start, I made a lot of mistakes, and I think the secret there is to learn from the mistakes rather than allow them to get you down. See them as learning opportunities and then go ahead and try it again and be expectant that some of them might be mistakes again. But over time, I suppose if you look at the Dyson model of development, James Dyson, who developed the Hoover, the vacuum cleaner, sorry. So Hoover's a make actually, but we all call it a Hoover. James Dyson, who actually developed the vacuum cleaner, the whirlwind vacuum cleaner. The model that actually got to the market was the model 5,200 and something like that, before it actually got to the market, because it had failed so many times and we had made marginal changes and then tried it again and tried it again. And then eventually what got to the market was this incredible vacuum cleaner, the likes of which we had never seen before, but it had failed over 5,000 times before it got there. And what you've got to see there is you've got to see that if something as successful as a Dyson vacuum cleaner is going to have 5,000 attempts at it, if I've made 2 or 3 attempts at something and I've got it wrong, I've got a pretty long way to go before I start to get to the stages that Dyson got to. So I shouldn't be frightened of trying something and making a mistake. What I should be frightened of is making a mistake and then not learning from it and not making any changes. That's what I should be frightened of.
And this is probably, so for me personally, I often struggle to work out whether I've made a mistake, whether I've got the wrong person who was completing the job, whether it was the wrong job, etc. And I often go to our peer group and kind of talk these points through as to how it could be improved. How do you learn from your mistakes, Alastair?
I'm fortunate in as much as that I've worked in different industries over the years, in different public and private sector organisations. And the public sector, they do things called lessons learned activities, or they might do an outcome focused review, which I really love that term, outcome focused review. And so they use different processes to understand how you do things. But my background, my academia, is that I'm a psychologist. And so psychology is all about reflection. So to take one model of reflection, you would take something that happened, then you would say, well, what were we trying to achieve? Did it achieve it? No. Why did it not achieve it? Well, it didn't achieve it because of this and this. Okay, so what are we going to do with that? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to make a marginal change to that and we're going to reapply it. Now, I wrote a programme called Post-Incident Stress Debriefing, which is all about understanding people's stress levels, understanding how certain events affected people, understanding how to empower people to say, well, this has affected me like this. If I go into the same situation again, I need to try to do something different. What strategies can I put into place? What tools can I actually put into place that's going to help me do something different? So I apply what you might call a reflect account approach to the mistake or to the situation. And then what I try and do is I try and say, well, so what? What was I trying to achieve in the first place? Well, what I was trying to achieve in the first place was A, but what I got was Y. Well, okay then, so how are we going to steer the ship differently then so that we try and get closer to A? Don't have to get right to A. What you need to do is you need to get closer to it. And I think that's an important point, is that sometimes when you try to deal with problems, we try to deal with the problem absolutely. And that doesn't always work. There's sometimes a staged approach to dealing with problems, and what you've got to do is you've got to accept that you got pretty close the second time, or you got pretty close the third time, but eventually you will get it right. And if a customer comes to you and says, I'm only interested in you doing it right, well, that customer doesn't really want you to know them very well at all, because you can't get it right just walking through the door.
That's really great advice there in what you've just said, and I think it's really powerful because, particularly going back to the analogy used or the example of James Dyson, as business owners, particularly if you don't have a support network, you can get in, well, even if you've got a support network, let's face it, you can get inside your own head quite a bit. How do you think you keep up to that business owner out there who's struggling, who's going through that trying to get it right cycle? What advice would you give them in terms of being resilient to that? Because that takes a lot of mental strength to keep going when it's not going well.
I think that comes back to knowing yourself, doesn't it? So one of the things that I think a lot of the time business managers and business owners would assume is that if you have an impressive CV and you have an impressive amount of experience, that what you automatically have is emotional intelligence and resilience. Now that's not necessarily the case. So you might have a very impressive CV, you might have done lots of things, you might have worked all over the world, and you might have huge amounts of experience. But emotional intelligence is something that it's arguable if it can be learned, but understanding of it and understanding of how it works is valuable, because what you need to be able to do as a business owner and as a manager is you need to understand where the people that you're working with are coming from, and without emotional intelligence you can't do that. And so to answer your question about resilience, how do you create resilience? So most of us are born with a certain amount of resilience, and I think as we gain an experience and as we get older, if we learn from the mistakes that we've made and we learn how to put that right emotionally, then we can gain in resilience. But I think one of the mistakes that we make is that we make the assumption that people are resilient, and I don't think that that's actually true. I think that people have got different levels of resilience. For example, if you've got two people and you tell them a piece of news, one of them might react in a really profound way. They might actually react in a way that you were thinking was quite shocking, and the other person might not react at all. And so the assumption that you might make is that the person who was really animated and profound is taking the news more negatively or badly than the person who said nothing. Now that's not actually always the case. Sometimes the person who internalises it is the person who's received the news badly, and sometimes the person who's dealt with it by being animated and acting out, they're actually dealing with the news quite well because they're dealing with it at the time. And I think that comes back to resilience.
So I'm going to circle back. It was beautiful, Alastair. It was beautiful. Are there any practical pieces that you can fit into that for a business owner that has made 2-3 mistakes and is starting to feel down or is struggling to find that resilience? What are some, as a psychological mastermind that we've discovered, what are some pieces that they can do practically? You know, they're on failure 4,000 of their Dyson voyage and they're feeling down, they're struggling with resilience. What can they do to try and practically either build that or to bounce back, or what advice would you give?
That's a good question. I can only speak for myself. So giving advice is a little bit odd for me, because you can only give people advice on what you did yourself. Because the things that I do don't necessarily apply to other people. But I like to read things, and I like to read about struggle. I like to read how Dyson struggled. I like to read how aeroplane pilots struggle, how they make decisions. I like to read about how surgeons struggle. You know, after they've made a mistake, somebody's died on the table, what do they do after that? I like to read about that, not because I'm in any way macabre, but because I like to understand the process that people go through when they look at things and they dismantle things and then they try and put it right, and then they move forward. So people like Michael Jordan, for example, who is or was, I don't know, maybe he's not anymore, but he was regarded as one of the best players of all time, wasn't he? Mm-hmm. And if you read anything about Michael Jordan, what he'll tell you is that he got millions and millions of things wrong, but it didn't stop him from trying to put it right. And he just made little tiny changes, what you might call a marginal gains approach. He didn't call it that, but that's what it's called nowadays. He makes a statement about, got more things wrong than I ever got right. And if you think about the things that he got right, he got lots of things right. So you need to understand that. If you read Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he talks about scheduling stuff so that you can examine it. And you can examine it by breaking it down into little tiny bites and then say, well, is that right? Yeah. No, it's not right for this situation, so you can examine it and then you can put it right. If you have a look at any other pieces of literature about how things have been dealt with and how they've not gone well, then you can start to see where the mistakes are. If you understand cognitive dissonance, then cognitive dissonance is about sticking to what you think is the correct course of action, whether it's right or whether it's wrong. So you need to be aware of cognitive dissonance as well. So I'm telling you a lot of things there about things that I have read and things that I have consumed. And then what I've tried to do is I've tried to apply these lessons to what I do, not only in business, but I try to apply these lessons to how I interact with people on a daily basis. Because I think that how you interact with people on a daily basis is important to how you are in business. Because in years gone past, we used to say, yeah, well, when you get to the door, you take your personal hat off and you put your business hat on. But well, these two are intrinsically linked, so you can't really do that unless you've got a detachable personality, which I think most of us don't. Or what I've got to understand is that how you interact in society, how you interact in family, how you interact with your friends is exactly the same as the person that you are in business, because people buy you. So when you're in business, especially in a small business, people are not interested in the fact that I sell Mars bars. I don't sell Mars bars, but if I was selling Mars bars are known all over the world. Alastair Robertson in Supportive Solutions is not known all over the world. What you get from me is you get a more personalised service, you get a more personalised product. So when people are going to buy me, then what I need to show them is the kind of person that I am, and I think you have to do that over 24 hours. Out of the office as well as inside the office.
I've taken 3 kind of key points from what you've said there, and I hope that I've not disseminated this like a Philistine too much, and I've put some posh words in, Alastair, to try and impress you there.
I like posh words.
So the first one is reading of other struggles, because I think 1, it puts your world into perspective, and 2, you see how other people are kind of coming through those things. 2 is to make marginal changes, to always marginally be looking better, because we are always saying, I wish I'd got this to this point, I wish I was this good. But actually, let's just move towards that. As a runner, you don't run a marathon on day 1, do you? You just make those tiny marginal gains and you look at your system. And then I think the third one that I'm certainly guilty of, and I think a lot of small business owners are, is that we have to measure, maybe not dissect, but we have to measure and look back on what we've just done and say, where can we make those marginal improvements? Absolutely. Where did things maybe not go as well as they could do, and what can we do marginally to change that slightly, to tweak it, rather than to throw the baby out with the bathwater? What are your thoughts, Hayley?
I think you've summarised that really well, actually, those 3 points, because there was quite a lot in that, in what you said, and I think reading some of those books must have been quite hard going, I imagine. I'm just trying to think about if I get the aeroplane scenario, but I'm not sure about the surgeon one. Well, sorry, I'm going off on my own tangent now.
If I tell you about the analogy of a surgeon, so surgeons tend to be, well, they're consultants, they're sort of they're promoted doctors, and the assumption when you were a surgeon years ago, to a certain extent, is still the same, is that if you were the surgeon, you were in charge of the operating theatre. So everything that you said goes. Now that's true, but what that means is that if the person dies on the table, you're going to internalise that as being your fault. And so what you've got to do is, and that's what we call cognitive dissonance. So you stick to your plan, you stick to nobody's going to actually tell me to do anything differently. So if you then see that as, I am only one piece of the jigsaw in a room full of 17 people, then what I do is I do my job, and my job is to handle the knife and to handle the stitches. And then somebody else's job is to handle the blood pressure, and somebody else's job is to handle the oxygen and all the rest of it. And so once you disseminate that responsibility to all 17 people, then what you've now got is what's called a marginal gains approach. So if all 17 people do their job well, and this is the bit, nothing goes wrong, because things go wrong in surgery, what we do is we take a 17th of the responsibility for that thing going wrong, not 100% of the responsibility for it going wrong. So that's why I mentioned surgeons, because what they do after that is they do something called a hot debrief. And a hot debrief is, the person died on the table, why did that happen? They don't look at how did it affect you, they look at why did it happen. So it's an unexpected outcome. How can we actually have a more expected outcome the next time? And the reality is that where people are concerned and where human lives are concerned, it might be that you can't get it right the next time, because sometimes people just die.
That's really powerful, because I think as business owners, when you compare it to that context, it puts a lot of things into perspective as well, doesn't it? And that approach of almost detaching the emotion a little bit, or being very pragmatic about the approach to it. I really, really love that. Clients then, just want to swerve totally away from what we've been talking about, because you started a business, you had lots of people saying they would buy from you, which I'm not sure if you believe them or not, but just tell us a little bit about your journey, about how you got those first clients and what getting clients looks like today and how all of that works.
I made the mistake of thinking that marketing was how you sell the business, and actually that, for me, for a small business, that's not how you sell the business. How you sell this business is, or how I sell this business is, I go and talk to people. So I try to, if you like, get a bit of FaceTime with the person who makes the decisions, and I go and speak to them face to face. If they'll have me face to face, sometimes they won't have you face to face, they want you on Teams or they want you on Zoom. But I would like people to look into my eyes and tell me what it is that they're looking to buy. And so when you do this kind of marketing approach, then you can end up spending lots and lots of time and lots of money on trying to market things correctly. And there are some really good tools that will get you some leads. What they won't get you is they won't get you the correct relationships. And so I've learnt to my cost. You can use Google, what they're called, Google Ads. If you quite fancy draining every penny out of your bank account, you can get some really useful leads from Google Ads. What you can't get on Google Ads is relationships, and actually relationships aren't easily formed, and it requires interaction. So what I've found over time is that you can do the blanket approach, you can do the social media approach, you can do the email approach, but nothing sells like people. People sell.
I think I'm going to piece this together a little bit, because one of the things that I think is really interesting about the dissemination, we talk about a surgeon and we talk about other things, one of the things that we always need to be careful of, especially with sales, is that we disseminate where it went well, because often, in my case certainly, maybe not in all business owners, often it went well through luck. Often we didn't actually have a repeatable process that we follow, but we put a pound in the fruit machine and we got £100 out, and we decide, well, this is it now, I'm going to win every time. So I think it's useful to go through that procedure with everything, with any procedure that we've got. And ideally for me, because I'm probably not as introspective as you're able to be, Alastair, I have to have people around me to go through things and to say, no, Phil, you idiot, that's not how it works. No, Phil, that you did really well at that, or you didn't do so well at that. That outside view helps. I think you've given us massive takeaways all over the kind of shop with this one. But I'm going to put you on the spot now, Alastair, if I may do. And I'm going to ask you about one thing that has really helped to drive, to grow, something that's made a real impact in your business that you feel other business owners could follow or could use to build. And we generally put this through to 4 levers. So we either say, number 1, bring on board new customers. Number 2, increase service or revenue with existing customers. Number 3, to cut costs. Or number 4, to improve efficiency internally. And it might be that it sweeps all of them, it might be that it just pulls one lever. But what would be your one thing that you would either give to, a young Alastair, or somebody who is looking to grow into business that you've learned from your years of experience?
I think a lot of years ago I did training with the police. I was teaching them about managing violence and aggression, because you teach people something called command presence. And command presence is not about what you do or what you say, it's about how you stand. And so you can be in charge of a situation just by your body language. And one of the takeaways that I had from that particular piece of training, through interacting with folk at the tea breaks and at the coffee, lunch breaks and what have you, was that their advice to me was that if you want to be a good police officer, you need to get to know the shopkeepers on your beat. What that means is you need relationships with the shopkeepers so that they will talk to you and tell you what's happening. And then as the beat police officer, you will have a better understanding of what's going on in your patch. And so that's my thing, is that I need to understand the people that I employ or that I contract. I need to understand the customer. And there's a diversity of customers. So I need to understand what their individual goals are. I need to understand how each of my contractors, how each of my trainers will interact with that customer. And this is understand everything in the customer environment. Can we understand everything in terms of the selling environment? Can we understand the reason that the people have come to me in the first place? Is it word of mouth recommendation? What is it? Or have they just Googled me and said, "No, you look good, let's come to you"? Because the last one, the person who just Googled you and said you look good will come to you, not necessarily wanting to look into a long-term relationship. Now, I think that long-term relationships, business relationships, are more successful than short, snappy sales. So if I was going to give you one piece of advice, if it was what one thing, it would be focus on the relationships, focus on the needs of your customer or your potential customer, because they might not come to you today. Focus on the needs. Once you get a reputation as being a person who will want to understand the other person and the other person's business, and then put a product in the middle that's going to suit everybody, that's when your business will become successful.
Wow, I think we're stunned by that. I thought you built it and then brought it back around beautifully with that summarisation at the end. I completely agree. I don't know if it's because we're all services businesses, but certainly having that deep relationship and being able to talk to customers, clients, potentials, and other competitors, other vendors that lead into your customers, but being able to know them on a personal level and them know that you are not just trying to sell them something, but you genuinely want to improve their business. And sometimes that's by saying, "I don't think our product's right for you at the moment," or I know you want to buy this really shiny thing and I'd love to make the margin off that, but actually I think it's going to be a bust. We can go ahead, but we'll go ahead with my non-consent, if you will do. I'll help you out, I'll come on board the team, but I think you're going to spend money with me that you don't need to. I think that's super powerful.
Yeah, and I suppose being more confident, even more confident than that, Phil, and saying, "This isn't right for you, I'm not going to go along with it." Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So actually saying to people, "You're going to give me £5,000 for doing this for you, but it's actually not for you." Having the confidence to say, "I'm going to save you £5,000 here because we're not going to do that. That is not what you need. I can't do that for you." So I think having that confidence, that's a different level of confidence altogether.
I think it's a great one thing, because so many business owners particularly, well, not even at the start of their journey, I think throughout the journey, they are so focused on trying to keep everything going, juggling all the hats, that it's quite easy to overlook the power of relationships, both with clients, potential clients, and also your team. So I think that's a great one thing.
Alastair, I would now like to hear, doesn't have to be a shameless plug, but the more shameless the better in my eyes. I'd love you to tell people what's next for your business, where people can connect with you, and who is your ideal client that you would love to get that face-to-face time with.
Yeah, okay. Well, we're a training company. We're a training company that has enjoyed a level of success. I wouldn't say that it was the highest level of success, because there's still work to do. The stuff that we do it's all round about social care. So we do social care training, but what we do is we try to form relationships with people who are interested in developing their staff. What's next for Supporter Solutions and CV Training is, we're contract holders for multiple different colleges across Scotland. We're contract holders for a number of different public services, including the fire service in Scotland. I'm going to continue to apply for these kind of contracts, because what I want this to be is I want this to be a successful business as it can possibly be. But I'm not trying to develop it any further because I already have 34 people. And if I manage to have 34 people that are busy all day from 9 till 5, Monday to Friday, then I would regard this as a successful business. So I don't want to develop it any further. I don't want to make it any bigger. What I want is I want everybody to be firing at the same level, and I want them all to be busy all day, every day. So that's my development for the next 5 years, is to make sure that we have enough business to keep everybody busy Monday to Friday. Personally speaking, where I'm going in the next 5 years, I don't know, but there are 3 directors of this company, and interestingly, I'm the youngest of the 3, so I'm the baby that drives the bunch, if you like. And so where am I going in the next 5 years? Hopefully where I'm going in the next 5 years is I'm going to introduce my son to this business, and he's going to take it over. My son is what you would regard as an alpha learner. You tell him something once and he goes off and does it. And so the difficulty with my son coming into this is keeping him interested, because he'll get bored very quickly. That's my intention over the next 5 years, is to try and get my son interested in it. If I can't get him interested in it, then, we'll have to look at something else. But I'm not planning on going anywhere anytime soon. I'm 10 years away from my state retirement age, which you might well have calculated that makes me 57. And mentally, I don't feel as if I'm 57. Physically, I feel as if but mentally, I don't feel as if I'm 57. Mentally, I feel as if I'm 25. And I can still learn things, I can still do things, I can still remember things, it's a good thing. And so what's going to happen for me is that everything's going to have to come up to a certain level before it can move forward, and it's not at the stage of moving forward yet. The development is going to be internal development rather than expansion.
Who is your ideal client that's been listening to this that you'd love to reach out to you?
So the ideal client is the person who's a small business owner. Big company, let's just say you're an organisation, you're a hedge fund or something like that, and you own 25 care homes across the UK. I can't make a difference to your business, and that's because we don't have enough staff to make a difference to your business, because we can't put 25 different trainers into 25 different care homes. If you've got 1 care home, or if you've got 2 care homes, then we can make a difference to your business, and that's because we can give you a level of training which is tailored and personal, which bigger organisations can't give you. So that's my ideal client. That's not to say that we will be looking for people who only have 1 or 2 care homes. We'll take meetings with people who have more care homes, or more, let's just say somebody came in from the NHS. So I can't make a difference to the NHS. I can make a little bit of difference to one of the departments of the NHS, but as far as the big machine is concerned, I can't make a difference to that. So the ideal customer, sorry, long answer again, but the ideal customer is a small to medium enterprise organisation that is looking for a development of a relationship for training, rather than just wants a quick fix training course, because we're not in the business of selling that.
How do people connect with you?
Well, people can connect with me on LinkedIn, they can connect with me on Facebook, small f on Facebook, because I'm not so much on Facebook. They can connect with me on email, they can connect with me on the 2 websites that the company has, or they can just phone me. I really enjoy speaking to people, and what you've probably gathered is that I can speak for quite a long time. And so if they phone me, I'm more than happy to speak to people. I love speaking to people about what we can do to help.
Thank you so much, Alastair. It's been absolutely super speaking with you.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
What an incredible podcast that was. I think that we really went deep on, you could tell Alastair's psychological background. Let's put it that way.
Absolutely.
What was your one key takeaway from that, Hayley?
That knowing yourself is really, really important. And even though we live with ourselves for all our lives, that sounds really silly, but it's true. I don't think many people really go deep enough into themselves to really know themselves. And I think that definitely was my thing that I took away from that. What about you?
I think for me, it was a small point that I think gets bigger and bigger and bigger as you go backwards with it. So it was to create marginal gains. But how do we create marginal gains? Well, we can only make marginal gains if we analyse what we did, and we can only repeat what we did to get those marginal gains if we follow a plan in the first instance. And then you go back to that, okay, so what is the plan? Have we got a procedure? Have we got a process? Because we need that, and that process needs to be focused on the goal to start off with. And then once we've got that, then we can genuinely look at how do we make marginal gains. And that's, in my mind, a relatively universal rule. Whether you've got 2 minutes before a meeting and you say to yourself, what's the goal? What are the key points I want to make? Or whether you sat down and you've got 2 weeks to plan for an event.
Yeah, I agree with you. And what I loved about Alice, the way that Alastair portrayed it, and it probably is because of his background, but he took a lot of the emotion out of it, which I think is difficult to do when it's your business and it's your dream and it's your life and you feel like it's all on you, particularly when you've got a team and you've got clients that you've got to deliver on and all of that. But I think what I loved the way he described it, which is exactly what you've just summarised there, is that detachment and that always learning. It's not always changing everything or going leaps and bounds. It's just doing little bits to just refine what you're trying to do and where you're trying to get to, and not forgetting what the goal is.
Yeah, and moving towards the goal, and how guilty, and I don't know whether this is everybody if I'm truthful, but it certainly feels like it's everybody. How guilty are we of going to the gym for 6 weeks, not getting the result that we wanted, and so changing from doing 5 sets of 3 reps to doing 10 sets of 10 reps, and changing from machines to, free weights. And exactly the same in business. My LinkedIn marketing plan isn't working. It would probably be better to start cold calling. It would probably be better to do Google pay-per-click ads, rather than saying, what was the goal of my LinkedIn campaign? Have I moved closer to that goal? Are there any marginal changes that I can do? If I wanted 10 leads a month and I've got 1, is there a way that I can try and move towards 2? Is there what can I fine tune about this? Rather than saying, I've put too much time and too much money in this just to get 1 lead, I'm going to try a different mechanism. So I think something for me that I don't have Alastair's level of introversion or introspection with, and something that I would have to consult with others on. Is there anything that you're thinking about changing in your own business, or anything you think about changing a process or a procedure based off that conversation?
I think I'd definitely like to implement more around that, what you've just said, around the kind of stepping out of it and just going back to those, because it's actually quite, when you talk about it, it's very simplistic in a way, but it feels like it's really, it is really powerful. And again, he used the example of James Dyson, and when you just put those two things together in that, you're just like, well, yeah, why don't we do that already? Like, why is that not just part of our everyday kind of, or every week in our business? Why is that not just a process? What about you? Is there anything that you're going to implement in your business?
I think so. I think certainly we've been working on our project scheduling and trying to go through the projects and do them more efficiently and create checklists. But what we haven't done is said, what is our goal with projects? What we're trying to move towards. Do we want no projects? Do we want projects booked 2 weeks in advance? Do we want 80% that are done on time? Do we want 60% done on time? Do we want 100% done on time? We haven't set those goals, and so although we're looking to change the procedure and we're looking to improve things, because we've not set that end goal, we can't make those marginal changes to try and move towards it, because how can you move towards a goal that's not been set?
Yeah.
I think, like you say, it's almost like somebody's just said to you, you need to work on the business, not in the business. And now you need to work out how do you implement that on the day-to-day, and how do you make that a practical, because we all know we need to do it, but what does that look like on an actual practical level?
I think you're absolutely right, Phil. Having the goal or setting the goal is really, really important, because everything else drives towards that, doesn't it? And I think not forgetting that Alastair's one thing was about relationships and how they are really, really critical and key. And it was interesting that he referred he was holistic in that approach, not just client relationships, but relationships with his freelancers, relationships with his staff. And I think it's something that we all talk about in business, but I don't think many people really do take the time to curate relationships. But actually, we always go back to people by people. And I thought it was a really great one thing. And it's not always easy, because it's easy to curate relationships with people that you get on well with, or that you click with, or whatever words you want to use. But when, it's interesting to think about how you keep those relationships up and how you build them when that doesn't come naturally. What do you think?
I'm not sure on this one. I think certainly with suppliers, sometimes, you need a certain product. There's a market leading product, and that's the one. And so even though you don't have a great relationship with your account manager, or you've not managed to build that rapport with your account manager, you have to keep purchasing that. But I think with our customers, I think for us as real service businesses, I think genuinely we need to get along with those customers. Unless it's one of our staff has a real click with them and they've got that relationship. Because we need to be able to talk openly and freely about their business plans. And I think you can almost feel it when it's forced. And sometimes with some of my suppliers where they're not a key supplier, shall we say, or that I can go out to the market, sometimes I do feel like, okay, I'm not vibing with this account manager. I don't think they understand where I want to go with the business. And because of that, I'm looking out to the market, because you can become commoditized when you don't have that relationship. And I think genuinely all of us kind of want to walk to the car dealership and there's somebody there that knows us and knows the kind of cars that we like, and knows, and maybe they phoned us out of the blue, and that's what I had with one of my Audis I bought years ago. Phoned me up and said, "Phil, I've got the car for you, come on down." And it was an estate, and it was the right, and it looked great, and I thought, yeah, and that relationship certainly sold me that car. I just didn't bother going around garages, I didn't look for alternatives. That relationship was there because they knew me, and I got on really well with them. And I think that's the relationship we all want, isn't it? Where we can phone up our customer and just go, "Look, I've got the thing for you," and we've got that trust, know, like trust, where they almost come on board and they're excited as we are to come and have a look at that product or that service or that idea.
Yeah. And I also think it goes back to, and that again we forget sometimes, that actually one of the perks of running your own business is that you choose who you work with, you choose who your clients are, you choose who you supply, it's your choice. You don't have to work with everybody. So I think that's important to remember. And I think Alastair did touch on that as well as part of it.
I completely agree. I think in the early days, much trickier to do before you've built that base of customers, where you almost just have to take, even if you don't feel like they're necessarily the complete right fit, you also need to pay your staff, you need to pay your bills, etc. But like you say, as your business matures, you want to add value and grow businesses. And I think you can only do that if you both, it's cheesy, isn't it? But, rowing in the same direction or pulling in the same direction. Yeah. And so naturally, those successful relationships are with people that are in your tribe or share your values, and you can move forward. Which again, it is probably, as Alastair says, why he wants to sit down and talk to so many people, other than the fact that he's so flipping eloquent with his words.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We hope you found one thing to help move your business forward. And
if you do, please do us a favour, share this episode with somebody else who's on the same journey, and we will see you next time on What One Thing.